Motion to.
You can just say so moved.
So moved,
Yeah,
all right,
that's what-
so moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you. That's Ms. Gordon and Dr. Ing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you so much. And we're also going to do, or my intent is to do 1510, 4200, 7270 school safety, and 6330 together, because these are both changes recommended by the North Carolina School Boards Association. Dr. Crane, if you think it's best that we split those up, just let me know. It's not a problem. And I'll let you walk us through these.
Sure. These were changes, as Ms. Evans said, recommended by the North Carolina School Boards Association. They are predominantly clarification revisions. So in policy 1510, school safety, we have the revisions are located in section C, safety of school buildings and grounds. So this is the first set of revisions. In the second and third paragraphs, to move the as required by law further up in the sentence. Earlier in the sentence, let me get all the words right there and in the right order. And then some language is moved down to the second sentence, so that keeps all the notification language together. The language that you see there in blue, it was there originally. It's language that we added and any other staff designated by the superintendent. They did not move that language, so we did and put it back in there so that we maintain the same language that we had before. There's also a revision to add an updated link to a document in the other resources section at the very end of the policy.
That's, excuse me. Are you talking about the Center for Safer Schools link? Or something further down? So I'm seeing the Center for Safer Schools.
That's correct.
On
My
page
apologies.
4, that's okay.
On page 4, there is a revision to update the Department of Public Instruction to the Center for Safer Schools, which was updated in legislation. So there's a revision there as well. My apologies.
It's all right.
And then the final revision in the other resources section
Page 7.
Okay.
on page 7. Yes.
All right. Board members, are there any questions about these revisions for 1510, 4200, 7270 school safety? No. Okay. Let's move on to 6330.
These revisions are recommended by the School Board Association also. They are primarily the movement of a paragraph up into the second paragraph has been deleted, moved up, and parsed and parceled out regarding vehicles owned, leased, or rented by the school system, not just school bus and an activity bus there, and maintaining injury and property damage protection provided through the provisions of the State Tort Claims Act. That language was already in the paragraph below. And then there is an addition of a memo, a link to a memo from 1988 in the legal references.
So with this one, I think I have a typo. In the second sentence at the top where it says school buses will not be used, it says for in, and I think we just mean one of the two.
Should be.
Do you see what I mean? School buses will not be used for in any purpose.
Got it?
Yeah. And again, I know that's a typo, but I caught it and thought
Do we have a reference on which for any purpose or in any purpose?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
In the second sentence of the top paragraph, school buses will not be used for, and then they've inserted the word in, School Board Association. We don't really need both. Let's keep for.
Four should be.
Okay. We'll remove in then. Okay.
okay, great.
I should, if you are finished with questions on this one?
Well, that was all I had. What board
Okay.
members, do you have any questions about 6330?
No.
I don't.
No, not 6330.
Okay.
At Policy Committee, I want to let you know this is your last time to ask Mr. Cecil Bell any questions. He is in the room with us today. Thank him. He hates this kind of attention. But Mr. Bell is retiring.
Well, then you just invited me to offer a round of applause. Congratulations, Mr. Bell. Thank you for your service to Wake County Public Schools.
Everyone be careful going home.
Okay. All right. Thank you
And now
so
you're
much.
leaving.
Thank you, Dr. Crane.
Sure.
All right, board members, if there are no questions, I would like to entertain a motion to move 1510, 4200, 7270, and 6330 to first reading on consent.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that was Ms. Rice and Dr. Ing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And we are now going to do 1310, 4002, parental involvement. We're going to, I'm going to keep that one just by itself.
Okay. And I'm going to invite Sally Potofsky to join us at the table. And Mr. Jerry Griffin. Did I say your name correctly? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you for joining us today. Either side, sure. We have a couple of policies here that have some overlapping revisions, so you'll see the same revisions happening in a couple of policies. I'll let Ms. Potofsky walk us through that. Georgie?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Edmonds, board members, Dr. Crane. The first four policies today include minor revisions based on the State Board of Education language updates that will take effect on July 1st. Or we want to recommend including explicit language from Senate Bill 49, the Parents' Bill of Rights. And I'll take each one individually if that is good to do.
Please, yeah.
So policy 1310, 4002, parental involvement. On page 10, section D, parental permission required. You will see in blue, the black text is already the text of the current policy. In blue, we have added a number 11, which comes directly from the Parents' Bill of Rights. The creation of video, voice recording of the student, except a recording made solely for any of the following exceptions, will need prior written parental permission. We recommend adding this language basically to make it clear to staff their responsibilities. We realize that this restriction on recording didn't explicitly appear in this policy, and so we recommend that the language be added for consistency and clarity.
So my question about this addition, and I know it's direct language, as you said, from Senate Bill 49, but how does this impact recording students in, like, sporting events?
All right, well, there are 5 pretty broad exceptions. The first one is related to a safety demonstration, security, discipline. The second one is an academic or an extracurricular activity, and there's no definition in the Parents' Bill of Rights, so it would be a reasonable interpretation of that. Classroom instruction, photo ID cards are pretty specific, or a security building like a video that a school has recorded. So
Great. I did see that in number 2, but I wanted to ask just for discussion because well, this is anecdotal, I'm sure, but that's the most videos that I see of, unidentified kids at a variety of our schools, and things like graduation or, events like that, because not every school, as we know, has, necessarily arts videos or things that get posted, but, so thank you. I just wanted to clarify. Board members, do you have any questions about the addition of number 11? Yeah, Ms. Rice.
I kind of have the same issue. I'm just concerned a little bit about the voice of parents. Like, are we really even having, I understand parents' bills of rights and all that other wonderful legislation, but I am just wondering, where does that fit with us? What, do we have any situations that's necessarily occurred where folks are complaining? Or is that something that we see a trend of in our district? I don't know of it, even though I understand that we have the Parents' Bills of Rights that says lots of things that we don't necessarily see within our district a lot, except for a subgroup of folks, but.
So if I may, I'm the Director of Investigations for Employee Relations, and we've had an uptick of cases where we've had to review where parents are alleging that teachers are recording their students without their permission in negative ways, trying to entrap them to say something. And so there is an uptick of allegations from parents without having any kind of knowledge that the teacher is recording their child. We've also had cases where students are in a crisis mode, and instead of receiving help from the teacher just brings out their cell phone to record.
I can understand. I think I hear what you're saying. And so if I may ask a question, I think I hear your indication around privacy, and I'm looking at our cultural and social behaviors of this point. Is that, or just in some of the situations, was that so that there is a level of documentation for people to see behaviors to help the child later, or?
Well, that would have been helpful had the videos been sent to us, but
Okay.
they were not sent to us. They were just
Okay.
on their personal cell phones.
Got it.
And not delivered to any administrator.
Okay. And so I also want to ask the question around the video recordings, if I may. Are we having, what about with students?
It's always the case with students.
Okay.
They bring out their cell phones and they record it at any given point.
Okay.
That is an ongoing battle, but maybe with the new cell phone policy that has been just passed, maybe that will be curtailed.
And the last thing I just do need to say is that while I do believe that there needs to be a level of security around cell phones, I would feel remiss by not at least sharing a different insight around the recordings. As we've seen in our social climates, even within our country, even within this city, oftentimes things would have never been believed had it not been recorded. And I think my message is understood. So I think that there needs to be security around, there has to be measures or policies in place, true, but I think at the same time, because of where we are now in this culture and in this season, there has to be some level, as you said, it's different if it's just sitting in the cell phone, it's not being shared, so that change can happen. But I am also aware that people aren't believing people unless they see it for themselves. So I don't want us to be as if these things are not helpful too. So it can't be either or, but I want us to also see that it's both and, right? Within that same scope, but how does policy drive the behavior for students who are not being believed on how they're being treated, except it was recorded? And so I think to your point is that, I hate to use the word entrapment, because I think that both sides are saying, parents aren't going to believe me that I keep having these levels of challenges with this student unless I show them. And so while I hear what you're saying, I just think that we need to figure out what does that look like on both sides. And I just wanted to share that particular argument to determine how is our policy going to drive behavior that, one, people take in consideration how they're going to speak to our students, and two, students taking in consideration how they're not going to be disrespectful to their teachers or misbehave, or it's going to be shared with it. So I just want us to look at that as we develop these practices.
Excuse me. So along the lines of Ms. Rice's question, when I read this, I really didn't think about it as a policy directed at students, at least not number 11. Or, well, excuse me, that's not correct. Section D, to me, was directed at staff. Because parental permission is required, but it does not say, it says written parental permission is required prior to the following activities. In the subsequent numbers, 1 through 11, it doesn't say staff shall, I mean, number 1 says the administration, well, that references employees. Would this apply to students, recording other students?
No, this would really apply to school system personnel, and there is, in Parents' Bill of Rights, there is a reference to that for this, so this is really meant for school system personnel.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ms. Gordon or Dr. Ng, do either of you have questions?
I mean, that's how I read it too. I read it as a directive to the school system on informing the parents of anticipated activities. So, yeah.
Okay, and then will you take us through the other changes, if there are any?
There are no other changes in this policy.
It's just the addition of number 11?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, if there are no other questions, can I please get a motion to adopt 1310-4002 on first reading on consent agenda?
So moved.
Any second?
I have a question.
Okay, so here's what can I please get a second, and then we can continue to
second.
Okay, thank you. Do you have?
So I was going to say, based upon what she said, determine whether or not we feel like there's a second for discussion.
Yeah.
To move
As long as,
forward.
yeah,
Okay.
because after we take a second, we can do questions, discussion, et cetera. So what is your question? Ms. Gordon? I almost called you Dr. Gordon.
Well, thank you. In around section B, parent communication, participation in conferences. In regard to communication with parents,
What letter is it? I'm not seeing.
B.
Did you say?
B? It's on page 2.
Page 2. Okay, thank you.
In reference to like communication with our parents who speak several different languages, like how are we making sure that that's captured in this policy? In this portion.
I'm not sure that it speaks, that this policy speaks to that. I know that we do try to communicate with parents in different languages. I know there are several school system approved names that will translate it into the language, so that if you're communicating with a parent and the parent has indicated that Spanish or Hindi or there's some other language that's their primary language, then any communications in that system, the teachers will use, and they will be able to communicate with the parents in those languages. There are also interpreters that schools can get and often do. So.
I can speak to that very briefly too, because I've worked with staff on some language assistance plan that the district had a very robust plan. It includes notices that are printed on on the website and in a lot of materials, crucial documents like IEP documents, things like that, that are printed in 7 languages, most predominantly spoken, that refers parents to where they can call to get free language assistance. So that, as was stated, the district will send interpreters to IEP meetings or student discipline hearings and also provide translations of key documents.
We also have a policy on this.
That's what I was going to ask. I thought it was referenced in another
Policy
policy.
4003 is called Language Assistance for Families.
There you go.
And we have an RMP for that one as well. In the RMP, it sort of lays out the kind of language assistance services that we do provide and reach out to parents to let them know about. We also have in our district a language assistance plan that we developed in a voluntary resolution agreement with OCR, the Department of Education, so that we are adherent to that agreement. We lay out our policy 4003. That policy and the RMP were both revised in 2023. So we, and I don't see any of our communication staff in the audience, either Chief Luden or Senior Director Sarah Clark, but there is an active effort on the part of the school system to make sure that we have all the language assistance resources provided to families as they need them.
So, Mr. Ramey, excuse me, Ms. Gordon, I'll come back to you. But along this same line of discussion, because we have 4003 language assistance for families that includes an RMP, can we, to satisfy your concern, can we reference that somewhere in here?
You could.
And what do you suggest, where would you put it?
Let's see.
'Cause I mean, unless you have a specific suggestion, Ms. Gordon, I'm open to it.
I don't. Let me.
It's in here.
Rather than putting language in this policy, I think referencing the policy that exists is more appropriate.
Where it starts.
So
Yeah.
after.
I think it would fit in section B1, which is communication with parents. That's, and so maybe just a new freestanding sentence at the end that would say, I'm not sure of the exact wording, and I would defer to staff if they want more time to think about the language, but we could probably come up with some cross-reference that would say something like, additionally, parents may request language assistance as provided in policy 4003 and its accompanying regulation.
And when you say just a sentence at the end, do you mean in section B1, so before, right above number
So
2?
I haven't reviewed the whole policy with this in mind, but it would seem to fit there since that's the section on communication with parents.
Well, and that gets in the weeds, so honestly, you can just, when we can put this on action so that we can discuss the revisions. Would that be the appropriate way to handle that?
Sure, or it could be on consent if you're comfortable with that and just are mindful that you can remove it from consent if anyone has questions about how we implement it. In other words, if you want us to come back and plug in a sentence somewhere, it's up to you whether you put it on consent or
I
action.
think we would want to hear
Sure,
where it would land, and I don't think it would take very
Yeah,
long.
no, agreed.
If that's okay.
I think-
What other questions or
No,
comments?
that was going to be like, can we just reference the policy
Yeah.
in here?
Ms. Rice, did you have something else?
I do, but it requires a little bit more time that we don't have, but in reference to this policy, if you would please indulge me, Chair, around coming back for a more in-depth conversation around this policy, particularly B and the communication with parents. Again, we know that policy drives behavior, and we need to see a strong behavior change on the ground, and this is the only place that we have to affect that behavior. Simple words like the board encourages school personnel to have regular contact. Well, encouragement is nice, but the fact of the matter is, you need to have it. And then it goes on to say why, right, within that particular paragraph. Because what we're seeing are disconnects in communication and staff not actually communicating with parents or having a hard time in which they see of being able to communicate with parents. And so we need to drive behavior to show principals that they have to show a little bit more intentionality of connecting with parents prior to students failing, all of these challenges, mental health challenges, to be able to help parents and staff be more of a partnership. And so this policy, and I apologize, I know we had graduations, and then, we're on an off day for meetings. It didn't give me as much time to really dissect every paragraph the way that's necessary as we're bringing it for us today. And so I really would love to see us empower our staff to do more.
Okay, so because these recommendations are brought to us by staff, we are not on a time crunch with this one, is that correct?
That's correct. We're not.
Okay, and,
Except that the Parents' Bill of Rights language is in this policy, right?
Yeah, we put that in there, yeah. We
Right.
can also move to make those and then
Could always bring it back.
bring it back
I mean, I
for
do think,
further discussion
right, I do
around
think the Parents'
particular
Bill of Rights
topics.
language is important. I mean, I think staff are aware of that requirement and are honoring it, but it's good to have that in policy as a legal.
okay, so repeat your suggestion for me, please.
To go ahead and adopt number 11, the revised language the staff is, additional new language that staff is adding. Go ahead and get that moving through.
On first reading, on consent,
On first
okay.
reading, well, we want to add the additional language about referencing policy 4003, language
Right.
assistance, right? We'll add that. We will highlight that in yellow because it will be language that we have added between this meeting and first reading, right? So you can easily find it. So we can do that on action or consent. And we can bring this policy back for further discussion around section.
Okay, let's go the consent route and bring it back.
Okay.
I think that will be fine. But before we take a vote, because we've not done no, we did. We had a motion and a second, and we were discussing. So before we vote on that, I wanted to see, Mr. Haggerty, do you have any questions? We are on 1310-4002.
Okay, is this for approval of the entire policy? Have you gone through all of it, or are we still just section by section?
So there was only one revision or addition, that was the item number 11. And then Ms. Gordon suggested we're going to reference our policy on language assistance for families, which is 4003. So that'll just be a reference that'll be added. And then you heard Ms. Rice would like to bring it back. So we're kind of going to stop there. But did you have any questions or concerns about item 11?
And I apologize because I missed the description, explanation of 11.
Yep.
And I had some initial questions, but then I was also curious how this worked vis-a-vis our mobile phone, our mobile device policy. As I read section D, parental permission is required, and it just says prior to the following activities, but it doesn't necessarily state who is initiating those activities. And I was unclear, is it school personnel, is it other students? Because if we have a policy saying you need parent permission for a student to make like a social video of another student, I think that's going to get just really very hard to enforce.
We did have a little bit of that discussion, but which, it's no problem, but, so if you could repeat,
Yeah, we did discuss that these items typically are understood to reference activities by the school system or by the school or school staff, not other students. That these items, this does not apply to other students.
Correct. I believe the language is basically verbatim from the Parents' Bill of Rights, and I'm going to pull that up right now, but I think it's clear in the context of the bill that it's talking about the school systems, the staff, or agents, anyone acting on behalf of the school, so it would not prohibit a student from filming another student.
The reason I asked, I guess, is in some of the enumerated sections, it specifies by employees of the school, and in others it doesn't. So that's why I didn't know if, because you make the distinction.
Exactly
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the opening paragraph does say the board directs school administrators to develop programs. So that's why I was taking, the reading of it is that this is directed to the school system, not so much
Okay.
other. But if you want to intermittently put wording in it to remind people about, because it is a very long policy, that this is as, related to the school system rather than individual person.
And I did just pull up the Parents' Bill of Rights, so the language in the statute is to prohibit the creation by the state of a video or voice recording. So it is pretty clear, it is clear in the statute that it applies to employees. So one way you can do that, to clarify it, is to just say the creation by school system employees of a video or voice recording.
I mean, if you all don't mind, that would just, I think, make it more clear and prevent questions or, false reports or misunderstandings about the policy.
And Mr. Amy, you're suggesting to put that in the section 11?
Yes, if
Okay.
I mean, I think that would fit there.
Okay.
I do agree with Dr. Ains' point that the structure of the policy, if you read the whole thing, you'll get that impression anyway, but it doesn't hurt to put that in there, and it actually kind of tracks the language in the Parents' Bill of Rights.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hunt.
Yeah, sure. So I want to clarify the motion, if we can keep Dr. Ng's motion and Ms. Gordon's second, that we will, the motion is to put 1310, 4002 on first reading on consent with the 3 specific revisions we've discussed today.
Yes.
And we will bring this policy back for further discussion to policy committee at a future date. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. 7130 licensure, I want to do this one by itself also. This is a State Board of Education change. Dr. Crane?
So for 7130, Section F shows the State Board of Education's updates, clarifying language that needs to be used in describing administrator reporting requirements, and these will be in effect on July 1st, 2025. The types of misconduct for which a licensed employee must be reported hasn't really changed, but the State Board of Education has added more specific language around the types of employment actions that an administrator is required to report. So, for example, when certain types of misconduct result in non-renewal, now that is clearer in this language. The rules also clarify that suspensions without pay trigger the reporting requirement, more specifically because suspensions with pay do not trigger that requirement. So these are clarifying language.
Great. Board members, do you have any questions? And Sally, please pronounce your last name for me.
Pitofsky.
Pitofsky. I'm sorry that I addressed Dr. Crane instead of you. Your name is clearly on the agenda, so thank you, Ms. Pitofsky. Say it again.
Pitofsky.
Pitofsky, thank you. Board members, if you don't have any questions, can I get a motion to adopt 7130 on first reading on consent?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
And this will go on consent, correct?
correct.
Thank you.
Yep. 4040, 7310, staff-student relations.
So in this policy, we propose 2 revisions. In Section C, we propose also including SB 49's requirement that prior parental permission is needed before staff reports students. And if we can add at the table, let's see, we could add the same change that we inserted in the prior policy, so that a video or voice recording shall not be made of a student by school staff. We'll use the same language without the parents' prior permission. That's the first language, to be consistent and to give staff clearer notice of their obligations. The second is in Section D4, the section addition, and you will see the State Board change in language there also, effective July 1st. We added it to this policy as well.
So one question that I had was, actually, you just addressed it, because even prior to our discussion, the language in this section C did not really match the number 11 in 1310 4002. And even the way that it's structured here is a little bit different. So I know you just addressed that, but that was the only thing that I noticed. But I think we've fixed that. So board members, do you have any questions about 40, 40, 73, 10? Okay. Can I get a motion?
Sorry, just
Yes,
before you
please.
vote, just to clarify the edits we would make to the language on recording, we could say to track what we said in the other policy, the language is stated slightly differently. So we could say by school system staff and insert that. That does result in a kind of long passive voice sentence. It's okay, but I just wanted to read it, see if you want to reword it. It would say, a video or voice recording shall not be made of a student by school system staff without the parent's prior written consent, et cetera. Alternatively, you could say, school system staff shall not make a recording, a video or voice recording of a student without the parent's written consent.
I'm fine with either one.
Without a passive, it's just a little easier to read, I think.
Okay.
That would be it.
Which one are we going to go with, the passive or the active?
Of active, I would prefer active voice, yeah.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
So can I please get a motion to adopt 40, 40, 73, 10 on first reading on consent?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. 4240, 7312. We're going to do this one alone as well. This is another State Board of Education change.
It is in section, let's see, the recommended changes are in section D, duty to report licensed employees to the State Board of Education, and we have included the same language you've seen before.
Board members, any questions? All right. Can I get a motion to adopt 4240, 7312 on first reading on consent?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. 7635 return to work and 7635 RMP. We don't vote on the RMP, but so this will be another standalone for 7635. I get hung up when it's two items,
Yes.
but I know we don't vote on RMP, so thank
So
you.
we would
and-
like to invite Beverly Griffin, who's the Director of Disability and Workers' Compensation, and Katrina Smith, who's the Senior Administrator for Workers' Compensation, to join us at the table.
Welcome, thank you for being here. Yeah. Sure.
You can sit over there.
I will introduce the policy. So for policy 7635, return to work policy, we are migrating the School Boards Association return to work policy. We've only made one change, minor change in blue, capitalization. You'll see this policy replaces a small subsection that exists in several longer board policies in the old manual, policies 2280, 3800, 4800, section 9.2.8. And that subsection just simply directs the superintendent to develop procedures for an employee's return to work after being out on workers' comp leave. For return to work, the school system's obligations are largely determined on the Workers' Compensation Act and state board policy. The language in this model policy sets out the goals for bringing employees back to work as soon as medically possible and directs the superintendent to set forth a return to work program that assists employees from recovering from a work-related temporary injury or illness to safely return to full duty when medically possible, or to return to a transitional work assignment of modified duties if possible. It directs the plan to include assisting employees who have permanent work restrictions to find available alternative suitable employment with the school system, and for staff to maintain close communication, coordination, cooperation with the employee, other school system representatives, and other people working to expedite the employee's recovery and return to work. And I will.
So again, this is a new policy, so this is the first time we're seeing this language. And if anybody has any questions or concerns, I'll open the floor. Ms. Rice?
As it relates to the return to work policy, I know that a lot of times we may think of things just in a physical standpoint as well. And I don't even know if I'm asking this correctly, but how does this policy also affect people who may be returning to work from disability when they're having mental health challenges? How do we still continue to support individuals who may not have the physical disability where it can be seen versus our mental health challenges that we're having with our employees? Now, contrary to some, I know that our staff have mental health challenges because 50.5 million people live with a mental illness, and I can imagine that out of a school district of 20,000 people, that out of our 1 in 4 Americans who live with a mental illness, that we don't think that our staff has mental health challenges. And so I want to make sure that why policy is so important to me of driving behavior, that we create a better culture of leaders communicating with people more effectively to not impede upon their mental health, which is the part we can't see that's being affected. If we could see in case I accidentally step in your toe of a broken foot that you had.
What we've found in a lot of instances is we do have employees who have been physically injured. There will be periods of times when we have to transition employees who have been injured over to short-term disability because of the mental incapacitation. And it is occurring more frequently now than it has in the past. We try to make sure that we are very deliberate and we're very measured, because it is a very sensitive illness. And so we work with the workers' comp piece. A lot of times the referrals come over to me after the employee has gone through the workers' comp process, and because it can be more than just a physical injury. Mm-hmm. It can be. And I will tell you that I am finding that there is an increase in mental health illness, and I'm dealing with it on a daily basis. I work with my colleagues who are going to come later in our employee wellness program, assistance program, and it's very troubling because we are seeing a great increase, and we are trying to help everyone that we can get the necessary evaluation, treatment, and steer them in the right direction, because, as you said, it's not something physically that you can see, but it's real.
Right.
And people are struggling. They are really struggling.
So it's the silent, yes.
If I can add, and thank you, Ms. Rice, for the question. I was thinking, as you asked the question, about our employee wellness program and assistance program that I think runs out of Ms. Woodson's office. I know Tanyetta Sutton is involved in that work.
Very instrumental.
I saw a presentation from them from the shack, and they have a very, very small team that work with our staff on those issues. It's kind of alarming how tiny their team is with, I'm sure, the load of work that they're faced with. And I wonder how, it would be nice to have them here today, and Dr. Crane, that's not a criticism of you not having them here, or it's on me too. I didn't anticipate this question, but yeah, I'm curious how that works, with this and that team. So we can, yeah.
Our employee support wellness coordinators are sitting
Yeah, that's
with us, Mia, Rose, and Sherry. And we did have them, we thought you might be interested.
Oh, perfect. Well, I apologize. I didn't know that's the team that y'all were on. Thank
Ms.
you.
Edmonds, but before you ask any question, I
Yeah.
just wanted to point out sort of structurally, we do have the Employee Assistance Program policy as well on the agenda for later. This policy is really limited to, its scope is workplace injuries, which is defined in the Workers' Compensation Act to include only injuries occurring from accidents in the course of employment. It specifically excludes disease, so it would exclude like mental health, diagnosable mental health ailments. So this is really a slightly more limited scope in terms of what do you do when someone's coming back from workplace injury. The employee assistance policy is broader in scope.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. What other questions do y'all have? Ms. Gordon, I'll go around this way.
That cleared up, oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's true, but I needed you to Neil to say it one more time.
Sure. So this policy, the return to work policy, is implementing workers' compensation rules, and it's intended to cover just workplace injuries, accidents that cause workplace injuries. The Workers' Compensation Act specifically does not include disease, whether it's related to the accident or not. So the other policy on the agenda today, the Employee Assistance Program, is broader in scope, and staff are here to answer questions about that. That would be more designed to help employees who are struggling with mental health issues.
I wanted to hear the law because it's important to me to hear the law because workplace injury can include, in our modern world,
Sure.
your behavior that drove me to my mental health crisis.
Yep.
But that's why I wanted you to repeat, because I needed to hear that you're saying the law says that it can't be inclusive to that, because,
Injury by accident.
yeah, so it's injury by accident, and I don't know how accidental that would be, but accidental, you don't know how to talk to people or properly trained, but I see I'm stretching with the scope, but I think that it's just so important that we bring that, but I heard you said we have a different policy that Mike can address that. I'm sorry.
And my question, probably in the same line, would be, how does that impact an employee injured on the job through a traumatic event? Could be assault by a student, assault by an employee, et cetera, and there is a resulting, not just physical trauma, but a post-traumatic
Right.
disorder that follows that is directly connected to the workplace event. But you may tell me that.
I'm not a workers' compensation expert, but I'm just, the statute, the statute says it defines injury and personal injury, and it's really just, physical injuries that occur from workplace accidents. But there's also an episode of violence statute and a policy on that, so.
That's what I
to-
thought.
To
This
the
is
point,
probably
if
a
a student's
different-
injured, if an
thing.
employee's injured, intervening in a student fight, for example, there's a separate policy where the employee can seek compensation and support for, and I believe that would encompass mental health.
And dimensions of
services.
wellness encompass that physical affects emotional. See, my
Of
folks
course.
over there understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course. Dr. Ng?
Yeah, so thank you. This is actually my line of work. I take care of people with brain injuries all the time. And so, concussions cannot easily be diagnosed even on a scan. And so, there's times when you have physical injuries and then you have, problems with cognition, problems with memory, behavioral issues or disinhibition or things like that are subtle, loss of sleep, more easily getting angry and things like that, though they're not easily perceived and And depending on the position that a person goes to seek help from, may or may not recognize those things easily. So I think, I always am concerned about people who return to work too quickly before they're able to be truly ready. I always tell people I don't want to set them up for failure, because that way, it just becomes not beneficial for the employee, and it's not beneficial for the employer. So I think we just all need to be aware of that. I don't think that there's anything that I need to include or add to this policy. It's just more so just kind of be able to recognize that as a thing to watch out for.
Okay. Are there any other questions about 7635? All right. Dr. Crane, you would like for this one to go to first reading, consent, or do we need it to go to action?
We don't need it to go to action.
Okay, all right.
My understanding, our policy says it has to have 2 readings.
Right.
It doesn't say one has to be action and the other.
The reason I asked is because it's new, rather than a revision so, okay. Can I get a motion for 7635 to go to first reading on consent?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Gordon and Ms. Rice. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, motion passes. And now, 7645 Employee Assistance Program. Are you young ladies going to join us at the table? Please do. And when you get up here, please introduce yourselves. This is
Did we need to discuss the, or
Did you need to discuss the R&P for return to work, or?
it's for information or for questions?
I am so sorry.
It is on the agenda.
Board members, do we need to discuss 7635, the R&P? We don't vote on an R&P, but they do have it for us to review.
I would like to review it,
My
Madam Chair.
apologies. You guys are welcome to sit anywhere over there. Okay.
So sit over here.
Thank you, Dr. Gray.
For the return to work R&P, the black text that you see is the current version, the current text of policy 2280, 3800, 4800 R&P, return to work R&P in the old manual, and it outlines the processes for returning to work. This R&P was last updated in December 2005. And so Ms. Griffith, Ms. Smith will describe the procedures or answer your questions.
Board members, what questions do you have?
No, we went back.
On the R&P.
Okay, thank you.
One question.
Yep, Mr. Hershey.
You struck the return to work committee. Was that a thing? It's in blue, so I don't know like what.
In B?
If that was,
In B?
Section B.
yes.
Section B. Yes, we understand that there is no return to work committee at this point. And so the changes you see show changes from 2005 when it first went into effect, and now the procedures are different. So there is no return to work committee.
How long has that been the case?
I have been doing this job since 2007. I've never known this bill to work.
So it was in there for 20 years and just kind of sat there.
Unless they, before.
Yeah.
Like, but
Right, that's true.
yeah, so it's not just the director, the senior administrator for workers' compensation, and the return to work coordinator.
Got it.
Is who comprises, the staff who reviews all.
And it's not
work
necessary.
restrictions. Right.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. We need a motion for this.
No, because we don't vote on it.
It's just me.
Ms. Rice, did you
That's right.
have some questions about
Oh, no, I'm ready for the next.
the R&P?
No,
Okay.
I don't have any questions for R&B.
Okay.
All right, I'm concerned about my staff's mental health. Y'all gonna
You're
hear
not
me.
alone.
All right.
All right, policy 7645, the employee assistance program policy. This is the last policy we're presenting for migration. It is updated 7645. Nia Rose and Sherry Brown are now at the table. They're the district's employee support and wellness coordinators. This is a policy that is unique to WAVE. The black text is the current board policy 2309, 3009, 4009. In the old manual and the blue text are recommended updates to the language describing the services and the current procedures we use now. This policy was last updated May 21st, 2002. When adopted, it will replace 2309, 3009, 4009. Overall, the changes update the language used around the district goals to help its staff, update the description of the procedures used, and make explicit protections that employees have when participating in this program.
And please introduce yourselves again.
I'm Nia Rose, and I am the program coordinator for the Employee Support and Wellness Program. And we're actually through ER. I wasn't sure who Ms. Woodson was.
Okay,
Our
okay.
program is under ER.
Thank you for the clarification.
And I'm Sherry Brown, and I'm the assistant program coordinator.
Thank you. And again, my apologies for not knowing what department you were with, so thank you for being here. Board members, what questions do you have about 7645? Ms. Rice, I'll come to you last.
Yes, right.
Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you. I had some questions about the changes regarding confidentiality. If we can go through these are at the top. First, we have all information, communications and information, and it's specific here, received by the EAP staff will be kept strictly confidential unless the employee has provided written consent for the release of information or release is authorized by law. But this is specific to information received by the EAP staff. Now, further down, there was a section that read, no documentation in the personnel files of any employee will refer to an employee's participation in or failure to participate in the EAP except as stipulated in the relative code section. So by striking that, we're saying you can have documentation about EAP participation in an employee's work file unless so stated. There's no discrimination allowed, but we're removing that documentation in the personnel files. And again, participation in the program or referral to the program or failure to participate in the program could come from other sources other than EAP staff. So I didn't understand the reason for the change in confidentiality.
Mr. Hager, I think my understanding of that is that it is not uncommon in some personnel agreements to stipulate that the employee will take advantage of the employee assistance program. So it could be an anger management issue, and rather than take disciplinary action, the employee agrees to seek assistance through the program, and those personnel agreements would be placed in the personnel file. So I think the primary reason for this change is to avoid, any obstacle for that. And I think the idea is that the language you referenced earlier on, that communications and information received by EAP staff are confidential unless the employee is consented to or it's authorized by law or meant to cover situations including in a personnel agreement would be with the employee's consent that it's placed in the personnel file because it's resolving a concern. And then another example might be legal process. It could be, there could be litigation with a requirement to produce documents or subpoena or something like that. The district would have no choice but to provide the information. I think that's the general intent, but if there's
So I
something missing, I think.
I want to push back on the first explanation, because you said that you might need to have it in situations, you gave an example and said where it's stipulated, and the language that struck had that example, except as stipulated in 2300. So that requirement would not necessitate a change in the confidentiality. The example you gave, for example, about the anger management or something where an employee has agreed to seek assistance as part of like maybe a negotiated settlement to a dispute. And again, understanding that the confidentiality is provided for by the EAP staff and confidential unless consented to. There's no such protection here for confidentiality or, regarding documentation by a supervisor, by a coworker. And one of the things that I think makes an EAP program successful or not successful is employee faith and confidence in its confidentiality. And I mean, we may have all run into situations where perhaps we've seen someone who might have benefited from a program but doesn't take advantage of it because they're concerned about confidentiality and doubts that a matter will be kept privileged.
Could I make one quick clarification? When we talk about the Employee Assistance Program, that is a company that Wake County has contracted with to provide these services. And so when it comes to the confidentiality of the folks that work at the company that is the EAP, they adhere to that 100%. Our program, which is in-house, and we are Wake County employees, we use them as a resource. So someone gets referred to us, we do a brief assessment because we're both licensed clinicians, and then we may refer them to the EAP. But even then, the EAP can't share anything with us as the referral source unless the employee signs that release of information.
And I understand that. And I see that as documented very well in that first section, because that's talking about the EAP staff and maintaining that confidentiality just as you described. My concern is two paragraphs down that does not refer to the EAP staff, but my concern is about internal district staff creating, a paper trail or documentation or somehow otherwise violating confidentiality, even if it's not details, but within a personnel file without stipulation by the employee benefiting from it. The existing language said that there could be no documentation in the files of any employee that refer to participation or failure to participate in the program unless stipulated. But we're taking that out, so now it appears someone's personnel file could include, referrals or, recommendations and then failure to participate in that program. And there could be valid reasons why you might want to document that, well, we offered this and they didn't take advantage of it. But I still know that for many people that might have a matter that they could get some benefit from the EAP program, there will be a reluctance to participate if they believe it'll be in their personnel file.
I think that's a good point. Actually, I actually talked to my colleague who works with, who provides legal guidance to HR about these similar questions, because I thought questions might arise about that, understanding there are very strong legitimate reasons to protect confidentiality in the setting. I don't think the intent is to open up the door as you fear, but it's wouldn't hurt to clarify in my view. I defer to staff whether they want more time to kind of think about the language to address it, but I think it could be done with modification to that strike sentence instead of striking it. I think one reason it has to be changed is the reference to the old policies, 2309.7, et cetera, is very limited. It just says if an employee is terminated for work performance problems, the liaison shall document in the employee's file the system's efforts to encourage use of the AP. So that would not cover the example of a personnel agreement. But I think a personnel agreement would be with the consent of the employee. So maybe it could be something like no documentation of the personnel files of an employee will refer to an employee's participation in or failure to participate in the EAP except with the consent of the employee or as required by law.
Okay.
Something like that. And I just don't want to, rush ahead, but I'm looking to the staff here if they think that they would be comfortable with that or if they want more time to review that. Does that work for you all? Does that address your concern?
It does.
I think that's the intent, consistent with the intent and spirit of the change.
Dr. Ng?
Yeah, so I was actually kind of, I don't know about the other board members, but I kind of like that previous language that was struck in about neither the board nor its staff will impose or imply any moral judgment. Because I feel like that there is a sense that even just the label of something on the file that the person is involved in the EAP may stigmatize that person as being in some ways flawed or needs some special treatment or whatnot. But that I don't want people to or the person who's considering hiring that person in another position to look at that and say, what happened there? And of course, you can't find out that information, but you always wonder in the back of your mind. And so, and that goes towards your argument is that that potential for being stigmatized prevents people from seeking help. Yeah.
So, Dr. Ng, do you prefer, or are you suggesting that rather than have the board prohibits discrimination or retaliation against any employee, et cetera, that we go back to the sentence that's struck out? Is that what you're saying? Do you prefer that language of the strikeout?
I feel like that first sentence is more just kind of a reasoning behind the subsequent sentence.
Oh, okay. So
Yes.
you'd like to have both?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think the only, again, I spoke to my colleague about the same sentence because I also saw some value in that statement of philosophy. And what she shared is that I think she would also don't think that there's any problem with it other than that the phrase personal problem has been changed elsewhere in the policy because that's sort of outdated language, not how we talk about mental health issues today. So if you are okay, challenges might be a good substitute just to be a little more generic and a little less loaded phrase.
In the introduction of the policy, we use personal or professional challenges.
Yeah. Right.
Mr. Hershey, did you have anything?
Nope.
Ms. Gordon? Nope. Ms. Rice, next. I do want to just, I'd like for us to spend 15 to 20 more minutes on this and then move on to AI because we are going to go a little bit over our time, but I don't want to grossly go over, so I just want to be mindful of staff and other business we have in closed session. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Edmonds. I think I heard you telling me that very politely, but I don't need to spend a lot of time on it because my colleagues have done such a great task of raising the same questions.
And if needed, we can bring it back.
So
Yeah.
thank you, Dr. Ng. So I agree with both those sentences that are redacted. I think that needs to be ranked. So that was one of my things that I saw as well. I don't really necessarily have any questions other than saying thank you. Thank you. I've met you wonderful ladies doing great work. We want to see more support for what you do as a board. It's very important that we continue to create spaces for people to live well. I think that we'll see a change in a lot of behaviors in our district in our school when we create a culture where people are comfortable with being able to share how they're actually being treated in an emotional space. And so I think that this policy, if anything, at another time, talking about bringing it back, I think there needs to be more around, or in a separate policy around how, in communication. And I think I can't stress that enough. I know that, I know for a fact that there are folks that email me, contact me, and everything that shares their concern, but we have to develop a better see something, say something policy around how leadership communicates with staff, because it is affecting people's ability to perform well. It is affecting people's ability to lead well when they are struggling within themselves. And so I just really want to say thank you guys for everything that you do. I believe my concerns have been heard by my colleagues that's already previously said it. I had the same thing with the confidentiality as well as those two items. And so for me, that's it with the EAP program, hoping that it can broaden itself a little bit more. But the confidentiality piece is extremely important to dismantle stigma. We have to dismantle stigma because people live with minor depression or different levels of depression, and they still get up and come and teach our children every day. They still get up and lead our departments every day. And until we recognize that people are living with this, people are wearing masks, sitting at the table shining bright. That there's a mask that they're covering, but they're hurting on the inside, and no one is noticing it. And so I have to continue to raise that awareness, for us to be aware of that is really happening, and that is going to increase the well-being of our district. It's going to increase the culture of our district. And so I just can't say it enough. Thank you all for what you do, making great suggestions and changes, and I greatly appreciate being able to be part of this conversation. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. So if we did want to address some communication pieces to go with 7645, would that be Mr. Ramey, this might be for you, would that be something that should go in the policy, or should there be an RMP, or should that be addressed in a different policy?
Not sure.
And Ms. Rice, you might need to say a little bit more about what you're looking for.
What do you mean by communication?
So communication meaning, again, behaviors. I think the best way I can make it, I'm glad she's back, but she might have to help me with the educational lens piece. Oftentimes, I had in some notes, oftentimes we will communicate with people that we may not know the certain type of language we should be using with communicating with folks. So I think sometimes we think we know, but we don't know. Sometimes we can perceive that we think that a person is okay, but because they're not trained in understanding the signs and symptoms of what's going on with the person, it goes over their head, and they can't hear themselves that their colleague is struggling with suicidal thoughts and ideation, right? I know that we've done some training in mental health first aid with our staff, but I think we only did youth. It should be a part of our professional development. When folks come on boarding, they should have to take a mental health first aid training for adults, because you need to recognize your own colleagues who are struggling and know the signs and symptoms of that. Only because it's so prevalent within our communities. 1 in 4 people, we can count off right now in this room, someone is dealing with a mental health challenge. But we won't know how. So I think the answer to the question is, there has to be a better language of policy that drives behavior on communicating with people. It's a twofold, one for staff to deal with students, and one for leaders to deal with staff, right? You cannot keep talking to these people as if they are not adults. Ooh, look at there.
So, Mr. Ramey, does that help to answer?
They're very interesting points, and certainly worth consider. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think about, this policy is about the employee assistance program per se, which the staff here can speak to. I'm not sure if the communication with it sounds like your concerns are broader.
Right,
Almost like a
Right, that's why
staff
she
training,
said
professional
maybe a separate
development.
policy.
Right,
It is.
maybe a separate policy.
It
or something.
adheres to our cultural competency policy, and it has to be a level of language and another policy or something, Chair Edmonds, that we have to create. We have to create policies in space that directly deals with the culture in which we are living in. And we're living in a culture right now where mental health is beyond prevalent and it is emergency. I have other teachers of professions that said to Shiva, the number one challenge that we're having right now in our classrooms is mental health behaviors. But if we don't learn how to teach people how to talk to other people, it's driving the mental health behavior. And then we're sitting around the table with all the mental health professionals, and they're nodding and agreeing to what I'm saying. And so because they're dealing with it directly with our 20,000 folks, and the number one complaint I'm sure they're getting is, I'm stressed out because my supervisor is talking to me and being very petty, being very manipulative and annoying. And until we address those behaviors, you're going to keep having flights of people leaving because they can't handle how supervisors are talking to them, and then they can't handle how the students are behaving at the same time with their own mental health challenges.
So it sounds like a policy dealing with staff training.
Perhaps, or I guess it's up to you all, I guess, if you want to start work on a new policy, or staff could see if, are there current policies where some of this kind of type of would fit. To me, this policy is about specifically employees confidential, confidential
So
support.
Mr. Haggerty and then Mr. Hershey.
If I could make a suggestion, what we could do is look at a future policy committee, have staff bring back policies that relate to mental health, employee well-being, all of those issues that Ms. Rice has sort of touched on that might be scattered over several different policies, and then look and see, do other districts have like one omnibus policy, that we have, now we have like a student mental health plan, before we didn't, sort of, and how we put that into policy, and just sort of do an inventory of those policies, what they look like, do they need updating or revision, can they be put together, and maybe deal with all of those issues together, and that way we can really focus on it.
Thank you for that suggestion. Mr. Hershey?
So I'm wondering if the issue is a policy problem or if it is more of a, so we can create another policy and it just kind of sits there as a policy. Like we just had the conversation of, we had the committee that was disbanded and it sat in policy for 20 years and it wasn't a thing. So we can create another policy, but does that effectively change what Ms. Rice was talking about, or does it need to be, do we need a policy for that, or how do we go about creating that change? So it's not just sitting in a policy.
That's right.
So it's a plan of action, and similar to what I'm going to get on the next policy. Does it need to be guidelines given by staff, or instruction given by staff here that funnels down? I don't know the answer. I'm just putting it out there because I hear the creation of another policy, and I don't know that can be very good, but I don't know if that gets to where Ms. Rice is talking about going.
I am confident staff is hearing us, especially Dr. Robinson over there, who can help me convey the discussion here to Superintendent Taylor.
Absolutely. I'm taking notes and I have it all captioned, so I know we really can't answer the questions now. But what we will do is we'll pull all those things together so that we can have a more intimate conversation and then really talk about how to move that forward. So,
Great. Thank you. And very quickly, Mr. Haggerty, you had a question about the school safety. Do you want to do that very quickly?
Do you mind? Thank
do
you.
not
I
if
will
it's
keep it
fast.
very quickly. I was not here, and also Mr. Hershey was not here. I reference him because some of the questions I had about the policy are just from experiences around schools in his district. That we're going back to policy 1510, which was the school safety one. And I didn't really understand this. Is it just that there was a state law that passed that creates this new mandate? That
Old state laws.
it's as required by law, the principal must inspect buildings, playgrounds, and equipment, and then we have the language, the principal or supervisor must notify the superintendent or other staff designated by the superintendent immediately of unsanitary conditions or repairs needed to meet safety standards.
Yeah, I think I can address that. The statutes aren't new. They're cited in the policy 115C288D and 115C525. And this is largely tracking the NCSBA model policy language, what you're seeing here. And I think this is the restructuring, it's just to align with the NCSBA standard. I believe the statute actually says that the principal must notify the Board of Education, but NCSBA has long taken the position, and I agree that the superintendent, as an ex officio officer of the board, is the appropriate person to receive that report. It's just more meaningful to have that go to staff who can do something than to the Board of Education as a whole. And that's,
So is it a legal requirement?
it is to report, yes. I think the unsanitary conditions or repairs, I'm not sure if that's the statutory standard, but at least I could look it up, at least for fire hazards, I believe that's the rule.
Right. So, and my concern here, and not to be flip, I mean, obviously, we want to be concerned about safety standards. We want to be concerned about fire hazards or improper equipment. When you start defining what is unsanitary, I have a problem in my district of a lot of wonderful new school playgrounds that are used as dog parks. And we don't need the school principal having to call the superintendent every time they got to go pick up poop, okay? And, I mentioned Mr. Hershey, there's a lot of schools that we have where the city of Raleigh has created these social districts. And so, in the middle of the night, bar patrons wander out and leave beer bottles, beer cans, and other things that I would call unsanitary on those. It's a problem, it's a hazard, but do we really need the principal having to immediately contact the superintendent every time they encounter one of these and address it? Because I think in some cases, to comply with the policy, this would have to be almost a daily event. That was my only concern.
Yeah, looking at the statutes, Mr. Haggerty, I think it's fire prevention that triggers the statutory requirements of fire hazards. And some of the, and there's requirements to report to the superintendent, to fire marshals, the various reporting requirements. I do think this NCSB language is broader than the law requires in encompassing, unsanitary conditions generally. So that could be modified consistent with the law, I believe.
Dr. Ng?
In the language that was struck out, it said unsanitary, in the paragraph above, it says unsanitary and unsafe. I think unsafe is probably more of an issue, right?
Yes, I would support unsafe. And I think, we should, document and clean up unsanitary, but does it really require immediate notification of the superintendent every time one of these situations is discovered?
Okay, so here's, Dr. Crane, if you'll help me. So we already approved this to go to first reading on consent. Can we, when that shows up on the consent agenda, can we pull it that evening, move it to action so that we can discuss this rather than rewind the vote we took today?
Yes, and I will add, I just found another statute, so we may be kind of stuck with this language. It is the duty of principals to report to their respective boards of education immediately any unsanitary condition, damage to school property, or needed repair.
Okay.
So I think it is a statutory requirement, and NCSBA has acknowledged that rather than report to the full board, the report to the superintendent will discharge that requirement. I agree with that analysis.
But even I feel rushed in this moment, so I really would, what I would like to do, just so we all are on the same page, when this comes on our board agenda on consent, I will ask for it to be pulled so that we can bring it to action to discuss these things that have just come up just now.
Give it
Okay.
further review for that.
Everybody good? Okay, thank you again, you all, for being here. And we will move on to our new policy 1910.
Did we take votes on 7645? Did I blitz out on that?
We did not. Thank you. See, I'm trying so hard. All right, so can I get a motion to put 7645 Employee Assistance Program
So moved.
on first reading on
Second.
consent? All right, I have Mr. Hershey and Mr. Haggerty. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you for keeping me straight, Dr. Crane.
Now the policy I've been waiting for.
Yes.
I wrote an email. Man, it was like a 10-minute meeting. He came up, he saw the stuff. He's like, it's going to cost you like $2,000. We had some more, and we talked about something. And I started to chip away at it, and then I got it. And it's best. There you go. Very well. Not every place I've had this.
Okay. Especially right now. I was going to say, it was your chance.
I had nothing to do with it. I just said.
I saw your notice. Yeah, she forwarded it. Just thought. Yeah.
Scratches them. It looked on.
I can still work and see.
But it wasn't.
I liked it, so you thought, so you'd know I saw it.
No, I didn't even notice.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
It was like lightning strike.
I think they're great fonts. I have I think on the last one.
Broken, but it was.
I'd love to have a
so it
conversation.
came down, but it didn't like bring it three down.
Right. I have clarifying questions about your thoughts.
Shut that fell.
So
My phone was down.
Yeah, I would like some clarity. Staff and board members, we did start late, which is fine, that happens sometimes. I'd like for us to go a max to 3:15, so we will be going over a little bit, but out of respect for everyone's time, I think 3:15, we need to call it, so. Thank you, and we are ready.
I was going to make a joke on the title of this about
Please do.
about 1910 not being an intermediate step between was it 1883 and 1923, the two Taylor Sheridan epic shows. This is not 1910 in the middle. Some fans in the audience are getting that reference. I'm like, this is not what happened between the two. This is not a Yellowstone reference at all.
Okay.
Yeah, those are supposed to be Yellowstone prequel series. Okay.
No, I got it.
Okay.
I need something new to watch, so.
Okay.
Always so good.
Be warned. So what we're bringing to you today is just sort of a walk through some slides before we get to our task force recommendation for a policy that we have just kind of thrown out there as a draft 1910 generative artificial intelligence and misspelled artificial intelligence language. So we're going to walk through the why, the how, the what, and then move through any of your questions in our path forward. So first we're going to start with the why and the how, so to define our challenges. So this is an AI-generated picture of Dr. Taylor from the picture online. That is his tie and his...
He hasn't seen that yet.
You can upload the picture and ask it to generate one with him holding a little megaphone. He made a request to staff, and that was we need a policy, an artificial intelligence policy, okay? But before we could do that, we really needed to do some learning, exploring, and developing. What is it? How is it developing? What does it do? How does it work? Take a look at the tools. How do those tools apply to our work? And then develop some policy and some guidelines for both the learning and operations side of the house. Our district is large, and we have 20,000 employees. Half of those work directly with students at a school site every day or more, and the other half support those school operations, right? So we've got to be able to address the use of this technology sort of in both spheres. So that's really both halves of the sphere. So that's really the approach that we started with. As we described to you last meeting, when we gave a brief overview, we invited folks. We have 35 regular attendees and participants representing multiple diverse stakeholders across the district, multiple perspectives, multiple levels of use and experience with AI tools. Some who, I haven't touched it, that's Pandora's box to me, and some who have multiple paid subscriptions to services, right? We had a superintendent's mandate to proactively develop some clear policy about this and to develop some guiding principles for our district. We began and I'm getting ready to turn it over to Allison to talk with us through these. We began with 3 core challenges. This was our starting point. 3 problem statements. And I really am going to ask Allison to walk us through these quickly, because she does this work not only in her work with us, but in additional work as an expert in the field of AI in education. So Allison, walk us through these 3 problem statements.
Sure, thank you for that. Before I dive deep into that, I do want to point out that a couple of the folks from that 35 team AI task force are actually with us. Charles Patton is the Director of Digital Learning. He is here. Katie Haywood is a senior director, I just gave you a promotion, a senior administrator on my team as well. And Sally Potofsky was actually one of the HR representatives for us on the AI task force. It was fortuitous that she was already on the agenda for today, and so I'm grateful for all 35 of them, but I did want you to be aware that we have some of the members who helped us do this work with us today. So as Julie said, we had 3 major categories. We began first by looking at the risks, everything that can go wrong, the need to establish guardrails, building the capacity to understand how this technology works and how it might impact the work we do as a district, both instructionally as well as operationally. And so we divided the work into 3 main categories. The first being acceptable use and communication. How is it okay that we use this technology, and how do we need to communicate with our essential partners about how we're using artificial intelligence? The second category being academic integrity, the ethical use of these tools, and creating teacher resources. And then the third group, and I'm going to walk through each of these individually briefly, but the third group is infrastructure access, cybersecurity, and data governance. And so if you'll go to the next slide, I'm going to jump in and kind of give you an overview of each of those 3 categories. So the first group was about acceptable use and communication. This group really worked on developing some guiding principles that are to become the foundational beliefs about what we think about the use of generative artificial intelligence in the K-12 space. We had some fascinating conversations. Think of this as the ethics behind this. The technology may change, but what are our guiding principles and our core beliefs about this work? We looked at updating acceptable use policies, which is 3225 for students, staff, and technology, and we went into the entire policy manual with this team to look at places where do we need to revisit potentially and where do we not, but to think through what other changes do we need to at least investigate to see where we might need to make some updates. And then we looked really deeply at how are we going to respond to deep fakes and things like that and other emerging issues as well. There's not a perfect world where we can say we're just not going to use this here, because it's out there, right? And so when bad things happen, how are we going to respond to that, and what resources can we create for our staff in order to be able to respond appropriately? You'll see those policy connections there in B and C. The commitment there emphasizes the thoughtful and strategic integration. You can read that. And in policies, in section C, the guiding principles, we talk about that equitable access and approval, as well as championing that ethical and responsible use of this technology. The second group is about academic integrity, equity, and teacher support. This group really focused on how do we leverage generative AI for learning and instruction. Things like personalized instruction, things about accessibility and equity. How do we develop specific resources? One of the things that I did in preparation for this meeting is I went through the resources from the 4 days of work that we did, and I pulled out every resource we asked these teams to consider. It's not that some of them they considered and said, you know what, in the Wake County context, we don't need this particular resource, but there are pages, this particular group, how do we develop citation requirements that we can give to staff so they have that resource? How do we look at best practices on how to communicate about AI, best practices on using it in the classroom? How do we address violations or perceived violations? If you think a student used AI to cheat, do you go straight to a 0 and an ISS or ALP, right? Or do we give them some resources to thoughtfully think through it? So they were looking at some of these resources. You'll see that work come out in policy in section B. and Section C as well, where we talk about the sentence can help reach all learners by adapting instruction. And then the guiding principles prioritizing student success and well-being, as well as embracing literacy and understanding of how these technologies work. And then the last and final group was really on infrastructure, security, and data governance. To be clear, the folks in technology services have always looked at these things, and they have always been thoughtful about the digital resources that we bring into the district to use with our students and our staff. But generative AI is a whole new world. There are resources that we have used for decades that when we brought them on and when we did the vetting of the resource, generative AI wasn't even available. And now vendors are slapping AI on everything, right? And so we've got to reevaluate our relationships and our data policies with a lot of these vendors. And so this group looked a little bit more closely at that. How do we communicate with our vendors? What can we say to our vendors? We developed a vendor letter that says, these are our baseline expectations. If you're going to use AI with our systems and our student staff data, these are our baseline expectations for you. And if you can't meet them, then we're going to need to look elsewhere. We looked at what are the things that we look at? Data deletion policies. How are they encrypting differently maybe with generative AI as part of the suite of services? And then looking at our governance practices within. So those are the three main categories of the work. And once we got to day 2 and 3, groups broke out into subgroups to dig a little bit more deeply into those 3 major areas. Giving it back to you on that.
So, go ahead, you have a question?
So I don't think we have this presentation in Assembly.
We do not.
So
I'll get it.
can we get that out?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll get it loaded.
Please continue.
So what came out of that? Well, to start, we had about 9 guiding principles, which are about 5 too many. So after sharing those draft principles with the superintendent's student leadership group, the superintendent's teacher advisory council, the AAA, superintendent's AAA team, we were able to really narrow and focus that work down into 4 principles here. And those are really the 4 guiding principles that you see in Section C of the policy. And in summary, or to broad view, safety first. Everyone gets prepared. We do it right. And teachers, employees, people still matter. We got to keep a human in the loop on this. So we want to make sure that students are successful and are safe. We want to make sure folks have that literacy so they can be successful with these tools, so they use these tools responsibly and ethically, and that we keep a human-centered approach in our work here. So the superintendent gave us a charge last year during our summer leadership conference. Level up. That's right. That's his charge for the district. We can establish ourselves as a leader in this area with a standalone policy for our students and for our district. We did want to tell you, we created the matrix here regarding some concerns, some safeguards, and some outcomes. I'll let Allison walk us through these. Do you want to walk us through? Sure.
And again, we'll get you all of these slides, but these are sort of the big main buckets that we looked at. So in terms of student data privacy, a primary concern is always student data. Our policy mandates that we've presented to you mandates only the use of district-approved tools. That way we can ensure that no personally identifiable information is shared inappropriately. It also makes sure that we have FERPA compliance that is set as the expectation. In terms of academic integrity, our policy will clearly call out citation requirements when a generative AI is used and emphasizes the role of human oversight in assignments. The approach aims for a more enhanced digital literacy and digital citizenship for our staff and students so that we can teach students and staff responsible and ethical use of these technical tools rather than just manning it. In terms of teacher displacement, we've said it, you've already heard it 3 or 4 times, right? Keeping the human in the loop, the human-centered approach. We believe that these tools can empower our teachers but not replace them. The focus is on automating routine tasks to free up teachers to do the uniquely personal and human art and science of teaching and connecting with our students. Focusing more on personalized instruction and relationships is where we are going to get the most bang for our buck in this. And so we are focused on that, not only in this policy, but also in the work that we are doing with teachers. We want to address equity gaps, and so for that, from that standpoint, we are committed to making sure that we have equitable access to these tools. If we ban them and block them, and we provide no safe or measured use of these tools, what happens is the students who have access outside of the school day, school resources, school Wi-Fi, all of those things, what happens is we exacerbate an equity gap, and we don't want to do that. We want to be able to scaffold and build digital citizenship for our students and make sure that we are not making our equity gaps even worse. And so we want to make sure that all students are prepared for an AI future regardless of their background. And then finally, the implementation chaos. We debated on even what to even call this, because let's be real, we're not implementing anything, it is here, right? But as we plan a more phased rollout and addressing of how this technology is developing and trying not necessarily to get in front of it, because I'll be honest, I'm not sure that that's possible. It is changing so quickly, but to catch up with it and to be responsive to it, we want to make sure that we have ongoing support and professional development for our staff members in order to be able to have a more smooth and sustainable use of these technologies as they continue to evolve. The big picture here is that this should enhance, not replace, the work that is already happening in our schools.
So in summary, we had 3 problem statements. We identified what we were really going to tackle. We had collaborative exploration with a deep and wide pool of folks. We did not include students on this work group because we did not feel that it was a good use of student time to take them out of class for 4 full days of instruction between December and April, so we did not do that. We did share our recommendations with the Superintendent Student Leadership Council. Fantastic discussion. Fantastic discussion.
It was.
We've taken a look at best practice resource. We've looked at what other states are doing, what some companies are doing, other districts are doing. It really informed our policy development, which we will share with you. We have a balanced approach here. And I went ahead and just listed the folks for you there that we did get some feedback and input from on getting down to our final draft of the policy. So there's no sound to this video, but this is another one of those AI features that we can, we're excited about this and happy to do it. And here's an example of what it might look like to cite use of AI in a presentation that we are giving to the board. We did utilize ChatGPT, which includes DALL-E for the generation of images and summary. We used Claude AI, which is by Anthropic. We used Gemini, which is a tool by Google. And we used Napkin AI, which is a tool by a company called Napkin, which will take text and suggest for you diagrams and images that really match the structure of the text that you put in. So a learning process, but this is what it looks like one way it can look to show your work and be transparent in your use of AI in a presentation.
And we wanted to model that
Yes,
as we bring this
absolutely.
forward for you.
Yep. So we would like to go ahead and put the policy up for you so that you can see it. And we will walk through that. You do have a policy.
Yes.
I think you can see that.
So while you're pulling that up, I've got 2 quick questions. Is there and Allison, I think you can answer this. Is there a regional or national working group? For example, I'm thinking of, I think Dr. Taylor is part of a group of superintendents of large districts. What can you tell us about groups or groups of educators, either at the state, regional, national level that are meeting regularly? What can you tell us about groups like that?
So I am deeply involved in both state and national organizations, and I can tell you that the work that this task force has done is parallel to a large majority of that work. That's one of the things in my work that I pay attention to. So COSIN, which is a consortium of school networks that I'm deeply involved in, has produced guidance that I have helped consult on. Our guidance is aligned to that. North Carolina Department of Public Instruction released artificial intelligence guidance, not this past January, but the January prior. This guidance is in alignment with that. I am on the board for NC TIES, which is the North Carolina Technological... Wow, I'm on the board. Technology and Education Society. Sorry, words are hard this afternoon. And so that group is, by and large, leaders from across our state who are doing this same work, both digital learning leaders as well as chief technology officers and practitioners who are still in the classroom and in the field. And we share resources. That's one of the strengths of that organization, and it is in alignment with that. The International Society of Technology and Education, which is an international conference based in the United States, actually is next week. I am headed there to do work on AI, and that is actually partnered now with ASCD, and so I will be there Monday and Tuesday to do work with that group, and that is work that we've referenced. I've also brought in, Adam Gary and I were able to bring in similar policies, but also guidelines and guidance that districts from across the country are using. We looked at districts who are similar to us in size, scope, context, just in general, as well as ones who are different from us. Tried to look at it through the lens of our strategic plan, tried to look at it through the context of what we have going on in Wake, to be able to do that. And that work happened with that whole work group as well. There were lots of resources that we referenced, and I think I just gave you like a tsunami. But absolutely, that's why it took 4 days, to be honest, to build that capacity and make sure that we are not trying to come up with something in isolation, because there is no sense in reinventing the wheel. And we want to be in alignment, particularly with our state, but also if we're going to be innovative and level up, as Julie said, we need to make sure that this is sustainable as we move forward.
Thank you. And I'll turn my second question into just a statement that we can park. I'd really, and I'm sure board members, we would love to hear the students' feedback and input. Regardless of where we go with the policy implementation, and I hope we could bring that maybe to a student achievement committee meeting. I don't know that it has to come to policy, but I just would love to hear their thoughts about how things are moving and just AI and in the classroom. However we can, whatever time is appropriate for us to try to get some students in front of us would be great. Mr. Hershey?
No, I was Dr. Robinson.
Yeah, one of the things that I would like to add is just for a point of clarification, when you say that you want students to be able to have a discussion with regards to generative AI and how it's being used from their lens and from their perspective. I know you mentioned the Student Achievement Committee meeting, but is that something that you would rather see come to a board work session where
Sure.
it can be done in such a way that everybody can be present?
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm not stuck to the Student Achievement Committee. I just, wherever it fits best, I think work session will be great.
And so let's talk about timeline. So I think the timeline would have to be after we start the 25-26 school year, where all schools are in
Sure.
session. So we're already building the agenda per se. So September, October timeframe, would that be suffice?
On with me. Like I said, I don't think it needs to interrupt our progress here with this policy. I just would like to hear.
Yeah, September, October, we'll have some work session time dedicated to the reassignment policy, but that's the only obvious conflict that I'm thinking of right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're right at 15 minutes, so if we could, Dr. Crane, I don't want to rush you, but I know other board members have comments and questions, so if we could get...
Sure. I'll do a walkthrough of the policy for you, since this is all brand new and all us generated.
Thank you.
Mostly, probably 85% came from our work group. I want to start out first by pointing out, trying to keep in standing or following along with some of the guidelines we try to establish and use. We are using burgundy font to show you that the School Board Association last March incorporated some language regarding generative AI in policy 3220, which is technology in the educational program. That is not a policy that we adopted when we were moving through the 3000 series. We have 3225, technology acceptable use. And we didn't feel like it was appropriate to incorporate the language into our 3225, especially knowing that we were going to be doing work on a standalone policy. So instead, what we've done here is you will see that language from their model policy or their model policy language regarding AI embedded here in burgundy font or red font. So that's School Board Association language that you see there. So we start the policy with some overview statements about the board recognizing potential of technology. There's a next paragraph that the board encourages the use of generative AI by employees and students to expand skills, capabilities, and to prepare students for work in a society where AI is embedded and integrated. The second section is a definitions section where we have defined what generative AI is. Again, using the School Board Association's language, there are lots of different definitions that kind of coalesce that are out there. But we went in and just used their language and what AI literacy is. We used their definition, but then we went on to include what our task force told us AI literate employees are and what AI literate students are, what they look like, both groups. How they can use it to enhance productivity, how to use it ethically and effectively to enhance critical thinking and problem solving, and to enhance productivity in their roles for employees. The next section is a section of 5 commitments that our group thought the board might make. So while championing the integration and use of technology, including the use of generative AI, the district commits to, and there are 5 commitments: maintaining rigorous safeguards, partnering with educators and students to integrate AI responsibly, to explore and create with confidence, and to equip families with knowledge and tools to support AI-enhanced learning at home, to offer guidance on the appropriate use of the tools and similar technologies, as well as the potential misuse of the tools at school and on work sites, to communicate clear and accessible information about district-approved tools and opportunities to learn about AI and how it's being used in student learning, and to implement a comprehensive AI literacy training strategy that involves training all students and employees in the effective, ethical, and safe use of generative AI tools. Finally, we have 4 guiding principles, and this is language that you have already seen, primarily the headings. These guiding principles are really informed by the district's strategic plan, our core beliefs, and specific policies that reference technology use, data security, professional learning, etc. As a matter of fact, when our work group was finished, there was lots of language that came directly from our strategic plan, from our various aims and goals that were included in this that we thought wasn't really appropriate to put in a policy language, but it's kind of a show your work that what got generated from the group. And these things were generated by the people, not by any tool. Really is the foundation of these recommendations really is the district's core values and the things that we are already strategically aiming to accomplish. The first one, prioritizing student success and well-being. The second, embracing AI literacy and access. So what does that look like as far as professional learning and instruction, and what equitable access and approval looks like? Championing responsible, ethical use of technology. And finally, maintaining a human-centered approach. And that is a quick run-through of policy language that we're bringing to you just for your consideration today. We can talk through, make any revisions, answer questions for you, bring it back to the July meeting for continued discussion.
So you all remember how long it took us to adopt our cell phone policy and how much discussion was involved, which was good. That was a good, healthy thing to do, the right thing to do. I imagine this is going to be very similar, so out of the gate, I can tell you we should see this on our July policy agenda for further discussion. I would do a minimum of the same time allotment. We're rushed today, which I regret, but it is what it is. So I want to be quiet and let other board members make comments and ask questions. Yep, Mr. Harity.
Thank you.
And I'll just go around this way. So
I appreciate you laying out that structure for us. What I'd like to ask is that I think this is a big issue that touches a lot of what we do. And so in addition to policy, I would like to see this come up in our Student Achievement Committee because, I'll be honest, I have a lot of feelings of hopelessness and defeat around this issue rather than excitement and opportunity. I really do. And I'm afraid, I see it as an emperor's new clothes kind of situation where everyone's just so excited, this is the future, and if you have any criticism, you're just dismissed as a Luddite. But here's what I worry about. We talk about responsible use and ethics. And we've identified, you have a good section here. We talk about requiring citation of AI. We talk about preventing plagiarism. But what I would like to know, and which I don't understand, but I need staff's help with, is understanding the learning process. And what I mean by this is that citation and plagiarism are not the only problem if use and dependence of AI replaces the learning process. And again, I'm not an academic, but I know we have a lot of people that are well trained in this. And in my time on the school board, I remember, for example, when we adopted a new math curriculum, there was a lot of criticism of the curriculum, but staff defended that curriculum because they said it was about process, it was about productive struggle, it was about learning how to think, not getting the right answer, but developing a mental process for being able to get to the right answer. And so when we think of AI, and you think about AI writing students English papers, or maybe an analysis of social studies problem, citation and plagiarism quickly come to mind. But how are students actually using AI even now today? Do they use it to solve their math problems? And if so, what benefit is there to citation? Are they using it for physics and other sciences where it's not about citation, it's about did they actually learn how to solve the problem? And that's what I worry about the most with AI use, coming in and replacing academic work. If we just accept that it's here, say students are going to use it, we can't police it, so we just have to embrace it. At what point do we have some control, or at what point do we worry about students losing the ability to figure out how to do the work to get those learning goals that we need? And so I just put that as a challenge the months ahead as we work on this.
I think the Student Achievement Committee is a great suggestion. And staff, I don't actually want you to answer questions because we have other staff waiting on us. So I do want to get through all board members present and just put questions and comments on the table. Dr. Ng?
Mr. Hershey and I both were involved in a discussion on this already, and I think part of my I still have similar kind of feelings about the pros and cons of using AI and what it means for the students, and not just the academic part of it, but also the misuse of it outside of school, those things that may potentially harm self or others. And things that I think about, like the ethics of it, and I mentioned that early, last week about the analogy of medical ethics, where, when I was in medical training, one of my classes was in medical ethics. Not understanding, everything about medicine yet, but understanding how to ethically use it. And so, this technology, it's going so fast. There's no way to really capture, exactly how we're supposed to do this, do that, or whatnot. But if we have undergirding of understanding how we should approach as humans on using this to help but not harm people, I think that's going to be something that I'd like to see. I don't know if there's a way to think about I think you mentioned it in this, one of the commitments is on ethical use, but even if there is a way to kind of incorporate that into our academic, to have some kind of a class or discussion, to age-appropriate discussion on how to ethically use these kind of technology. I think that's something I would like to potentially see. And then, it kind of goes along with something that I always talk about with my kids, is like character formation. How is it, what is it to be a kind person, to be a person who's responsible, a person who will be willing to do good to others and not harm other people. And so that, this technology can potentially do harm to others in a way that is we've not seen before. And so I do really want to make sure that we have that in mind when we're talking about our kids. And I'm not trying to raise other people's kids. This is really still a responsibility for our own kids to teach them the right way. But certainly, if we have a way to provide some of these guardrails, I think that'll be good.
Mr. Hershey?
So I don't know if, first of all, thanks for putting us on early.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw my email today.
Just pulled it up.
Yeah, so Dr. Ng and I had very similar thoughts right off the bat. And so I have a paragraph. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but the first sentence of the language I worked up that would go right at the top is, the board also acknowledges its ethical and moral responsibility to ensure that such tools are used in a way that reflect and reinforce the core values of public education, which I think is what. So I have a lot of thoughts. I'm going to make them brief about some of the things in there. One, I don't think we should ever reference the strategic plan and policy, because the strategic plan is going to change. So I think I would strike stuff like that. I don't love the commitment stuff, but this is kind of a philosophical question I have for my colleagues, is do we create more of a broad principled policy given the nature of the evolving technology? So we have the policies, the principles, we have the principles in the policy, and then staff either works up an RMP or works up annual guidelines to, here's what the expectation is. So we're not listing everything from citation and then it changes in 2 months and we have to go back to policy. So that was kind of what I just wanted to put out there, and I will leave it at that for now since we are short on time.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Ms. Rice?
Thank you for this presentation. Of course, I had a teenager at home that's very familiar with these particular things. I did want to ask, I feel like sometimes we fear what we don't know. And so this is the conversation that I have here too. I agree with Chair. However, there has to be a level of teaching and training. I think that our society is changing. It is what it is. They did a great job with sharing. We can't get in front of this. It is not going to change. And if we want to create 21st century learners for where we are, AI is the thing and the place to be. It's in every workforce. It is in everybody's position. But the thing that I like about when we talk about education, if I can say, is that in order for AI to work, I do really need for everybody to understand this. In order for AI to effectively work, you have to have a level of intelligence to tell it what to do to generate for you, for something to really work and for it to make sense. And so I think it's more, you can't just say such and such, but you still have to have a level of creativity, a level of a thought process in order to even generate AI, for it to make sense. And AI's tools, while they may be simplistic in some form, it still requires a level of thought, it still requires a level of comprehension that's not so simple. And so I do believe and see that, I think that staff has done a great job with incorporating these pieces. And I think a thing for me is what Mr. Hershey referenced earlier in our board meeting today, is not about having a policy, but it's about implementation of policy. And I think that you all have captured the concerns of both sides of saying, hey, we can't keep ignoring it and act like it's not here, and then want to discipline students because they're going to use what society is. And I happen to see a lot of great things within AI that's generated and created around sharing storytelling and things of that nature. But I think the key here is about training our students. Dr. Weeding said it's best, we're not here to raise someone else's kids. And so if you want AI to produce positive and thoughtful things, you still have to have the human factor, because you still have to teach the positive human factor to the students to actually put into the generation of AI. And so I just want us to remember that professional development with our staff can help protect us with the guardrails that I think my colleagues are expressing, that I too can value what they're saying. I just believe that we have to be the ones to teach and not be fearful in what is happening, but do more, it's about learning to increase responsibility.
Thank you. Ms. Gordon? Thank you. I just wanted to say that I can really appreciate the wording and the thoughtfulness that was put into the policy, the first iteration of the policy. I like that it's not, it doesn't focus on a deficit mindset. It's very, positive and hopeful about how we can utilize AI with instruction and, around, even, building up educators. I did want to say that I completely agree with also bringing this to student achievement. I think we are on the cusp of really seeing how AI is going to and needs to really change the way we look at instruction altogether. Mm-hmm. I'm talking, how are we putting AI together with things like project-based learning? How are we utilizing AI in the classroom in more of a flipped model approach, and not just giving students a prompt or a problem and then they go out and AI, they go to AI and it's solved, but more of a flipped approach. And I understand the reservations behind it. And truthfully, because in my line of work, this is what we are currently working on in the professional learning world, with trying to figure out how can we work with educators and how can we skill up educators to understand how we can put AI with instruction. But I will say that we use AI whether we know it every single day. Students, every time a student looks at a screen, they are using AI. And so I do want us to remember that although there are reservations, and to be quite honest, educators have reservations about it as well. But we are really going to have to figure out how we can take AI and look at instruction across the board very differently. It is a game changer. It is a way for the district to be innovative and to lead in this work. And my last comment is, I would be remiss if I did not mention that the National Education Association also is doing great work around AI. They have free webinars that are out, not just for NEA members, but webinars around maximizing educator impact, looking at AI's role in special education, and how we're utilizing strategies to enhance learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, thank you. Please let the team know, however you can, the working group, thank you. I was trying to say workforce, and I knew that was not what I wanted to say. Convey our thanks to the working group as best you can, and we look forward to doing this work with you. And I'm going to adjourn our policy committee at 3:19. I want that extra minute. Got it. Thank you.
Because it's technically closed session.
Yes.